Hello, Research Method students, and welcome to lecture number 2, the scientific method. And what we'll be doing today is just going a little bit farther into what research methods are. We know the tools, we know that they are tools. We're just going to talk a little bit more about what the tools are. So our lecture today is going to follow the following format. What is science? I'm going to talk a little more about the scientific method that we mentioned last time. Then I'm going to talk about some alternatives to science. And many people are surprised that I talk about alternatives during the lecture, but I think it's a really good idea so you know when to use science and when to use other ways of knowing. After that, I normally do a live demonstration, but that's not going to happen now. So I'm going to have you watch a really great video about a puzzle. It's kind of a puzzle. I'll let you be surprised on that. And finally, we're going to wrap it up by talking about the research process. So I think this will divide into about 3 videos. The first will be what is science and ways of knowing. The second will be the online video I'll direct you to. And then the last one will be the research process. So let's get started. What is science? Well, science is defined by its way of thinking. It's a process, not technologies. So you can be a scientist without having a microscope or a Western blot machine or any of the other things that sometimes are associated with science and science fiction movies. Science is simply a way of thinking. Scientists ask questions. It's as a process of inquiry. It's a process of asking questions. And as we talked about last time, it's asking questions in the right way. And science is also characterized by skepticism, which means we should always be skeptical of findings. The mantra of the scientist is prove it. Prove it to me with evidence. Scientists ask questions and want proof. They don't just take people's word for it. So just as an example, and I'm sure you guys have learned this early on in your education, and if not, now is a very good time to review it. You've been taught about the internet and how there's lots of scammers out there. And so when you go to the internet, you're automatically a little bit skeptical. And so what you should normally do when you read something on the internet, you should be skeptical. You should know the source. For example, when I get health advice, I don't get it from just any person that posts on the web. I get my health advice. There's a really good Harvard health advice series that gives great information from Harvard University, which I know is a really good source. There's also the National Institutes of Health, the National Institutes of Aging, and then there's another really good one out of Johns Hopkins University. So I'm not just taking anybody's word. I only take the words of experts. I also want to look for the most recent update of the material, especially now because the web has been so long, and I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes you wander into some pretty weird pages that you look at them and you realize they're probably from about 1995. So don't look for the most recent update of the material. And a lot of web pages will have on the bottom in the strip, it'll show when the material was updated. That's always a good way. You should be skeptical of weird looking sites. And then obviously beware of sites with many spelling and grammatical errors. That means the person is not very educated. And then also, and this is key, especially when you're looking through news stories or Wikipedia even, you should always look for hyperlinks. So if you've got a source, you're looking at a source that could be maybe a little sketchy, one good thing to do is follow the links in that source and actually read the information to see if it's true or not. So don't, if you've got a source that you're not 100% sure of, you can validate that source by looking for other sources, credible sources that say the same thing. So be skeptical. So now we're going to go into the ways of knowing. And as I mentioned before, science is not the only way of looking at the world. There are many, many ways of looking at the world. And to be honest, sometimes you don't always use science. I am not going to sit down and do a study of what I should eat for breakfast every morning. I eat what I want for breakfast. Of course, I try to eat healthy and everything, but deciding for breakfast for me is more on intuition. So here are some other ways of knowing about the world, and it's your job to decide what's the appropriate way to use for the decisions you need to make. However, I would hope that if you are spending a lot of money on something or building a bridge or having surgery, you want somebody who knows a little bit about science because you want to make sure those kinds of jobs are done right. So, ways of knowing. The first one is tenacity. And the slogan of someone who's tenacious or who uses this way of knowing often is, "It has always been that way." So there's a little stubborn donkey there. And my best example for this is a lot of politics, not necessarily the president, but a lot of elections you see from senators or even congressmen or women from the House of Representatives. People usually tend to vote for who's already in office, right? They're thinking, oh, well, this is the way we've always done it. Let's just keep it going. It's always been this way. The second way of knowing is intuition. And the slogan for intuition is, "It just feels true." I have a great story about this. My mom, there was this new girl who moved to my school in about 6th grade, and my mom never liked her. And I really did. I thought she was fun. I thought she was, little cool, really cool when you're an 11-year-old. She did some cool 11-year-old things. And my mom said, "No, I don't want you to hang around with her because, mark my words, I can tell that something, she's going to come to no good." Yes, my mom actually said that. And so it turned out when we got older, yeah, this one girl got into drugs and had kind of a rough life for a while. I lost touch with her, but my mom always said, "I trust my intuition." So it just feels right. Now, if you take a psychology class, there's a lot of other explanations for this, and I might use this for some decisions, but not necessarily all of them. I think science is better. So the third way is authority, and the slogan for this one is, "The boss says it's true." So this way of knowing is you take the opinion or advice or do what an authority figure says so. And the picture I have there is a very young Arnold Schwarzenegger, because that's when he was governor of California. And many people follow political figures like this, and it's kind of sad. Even when the political figures are really wrong, people will follow them. Another person of authority, it might be a priest or a pastor. Some people follow what their priest or pastors say, or an elder. In some cultures, if an older person is in a position of authority, you do what they say. You adopt the worldview that they have. If they say it's true, it's true. Occasionally, sometimes this is a perfectly valid way of knowing, and sometimes it can be really problematic. The fourth way of knowing is rationalism, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's rational. It makes sense logically. And that's when you use logic. I just said that word already. That's when you use logic to make decisions. And let me give you an example of that. Let's say that I open my lunch that my husband packed, and he put a green apple in my lunch. I have never, ever had a green apple. So I take a bite out of that green apple, and it's bitter. It's a really bitter taste. I don't finish that green apple because I don't like bitter. So the next day, I find a green apple in the lunch that my husband packed. And because I'm still not 100% sure about green apples, that first one I had might have been an anomaly, it might have been a little bit off. So I take a bite into the second green apple, and guess what? It's super bitter. You can see me now, I'm making a lemon face. Super bitter. So I have had 2 experiences with green apples that have been bitter. So the third day, I opened my lunch that my husband packed, and guess what? There's another apple in there. I look at that apple and say, I'm not going to eat it because all green apples are bitter. You see what happened there? I learned through logic. Even though I've never tasted all green apples, the ones I've had are bitter. So it makes sense that all green apples are bitter. So that's logic. That's using a rule. It's inferring. I haven't tasted this third green apple, but I am pretty sure because I've tasted 2 other green apples that are bitter. And because they were bitter and I know they were bitter, I infer logically that third green apple is bitter. That's rationalism. Now, the 5th one is empiricism. And that's when I observe something to be true. I see it, I touch it, I feel it. And actually, empiricism was in that green apple example too. The first time I bit that apple, how did I know? I tasted it. Empiricism stands for experiencing it with your 5 senses: sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. So if you directly use one of those senses to test something, you know that it's true because you observed it to be true. Now, if we think about it technically, there are 2 kinds of empiricism. There's what we like to call hard empiricism, when I absolutely observe it or hear it or touch or feel it with one of my senses, and that's called hard empiricism because I directly experienced it. And in the social science, we often use what's called soft empiricism. And soft empiricism is when I'm looking to observe something that I cannot see directly. So, for example, let's say that I want to study jealousy in dogs. My dogs are totally jealous of each other. And I am petting Mookie, he's the big one. And all of a sudden, Brucey, the little one, comes along and he knocks my hand off Mookie with his nose. So I'm petting one dog and the other dog comes up and pushes my hand away. Okay, I would say that's jealousy. In actuality, all I saw was a push of the nose. So, but soft empiricism, because of what I know about my dogs and what I know about jealousy, I'm pretty sure that's jealousy. So sometimes we'll use soft empiricism when we ask somebody a question about, like, say, for example, self-esteem. We can't see their self-esteem directly, but if they walk around with their chest puffed out and their head held high, we can assume through soft empiricism, we see them act like they've got high self-esteem. So we say we observed it, even though we're not really observing the self-esteem itself, because you can't see self-esteem. We're observing the characteristics associated with self-esteem. So we consider that to be empiricism. So finally, we come to the best way of knowing, and that's science. It's a combination of rationalism and empiricism. I'm going to stop now because it's time for you to watch a video. And in this video, you're going to see a woman, I'm assuming she's a math professor or something, describe, it's called the Monty Hall problem. And in order to solve this problem, she uses two of these ways of knowing. And I'm going to give you a clue. The ways of knowing she sees, that she uses, are rationalism and empiricism. So when you watch the movie, try to guess when she's using rationalism to solve the Monty Hall problem and when she's using the empiricism to solve the Monty Hall problem. Or in other words, when is she using logic and when is she using observation? I'll let you watch that movie and I'll come back in a little bit with the rest of the lecture. Yes, I will.